This problem for the translator.
Okay.
This problem, this not can translate it. So, you know?
Yeah.
And try.
Uh-huh.
मुश्ताए दिल के मसीहा नफसे में आयत किसे अनफासे खुशश बूए कसे में आयत از غم و هجر مکن ناله و فریاد که من زدم فاله و فریاد رسه می آید که زن خاص خوشش بوی کسه می از غم و هجر مکن ناله و فریاد که من
It is the rare person willing to make the unqualified sacrifice who changes the world. This is a story of individuals from 3 different countries drawn to a stark corner of the earth, ravaged by war and famine, for one purpose only: to serve others without respect of race, political, or religious persuasion. On August 3, 2001, 8 anonymous people were suddenly thrust upon the world stage, reluctant players in a life and death struggle between good and evil. All 8 were accused of trying to convert Muslims to Christianity.
The more I got to know the Afghans, the more I heard of their suffering. These people crowded into refugee camps and lived in very miserable conditions. We worked very hard there in these camps. We built up many houses. We built BHUs, basic health units, little clinics, schools. We had large distributions going on there, food distributions amongst the refugees. We started also a widows counseling center, that what we called it. It was a place where war widows and their children were helped. Really felt great compassion for these people, great love for the people. Our work started in '84.
One day we got a trip into the refugee camp there, and there was one little girl. She was maybe 10, and she clung to me, and we just talked with hand and feet, and she was so sweet. And she had a medallion around her neck, and it was a Mona Lisa. And I just wanted to tell her, look, oh, this, I know this picture, it is in Paris, and it's so beautiful, you know. And then I asked her through the interpreter, do you know who it is on this picture? And then her face lit up, and she said, yeah, this is my mom. She died when I was very small. All my wise Western words, they just stuck into my throat, and I really could hear God's voice at that moment. And he said, what's about you? What's about coming back? What's about doing something real in this place? I think in this moment my wish to come to this country was born.
What set the stage for arresting us was a visit by our 2 American staff members, Dana and Heather, to an Afghan family.
We showed up there, it was like any other day that we'd been there. There was kids running around, chickens, there was laundry hanging from the clothesline, there was fire burning in the courtyard. They were making bread and cooking tea, and it was hot, you know, it was any normal day that we'd experienced in an Afghan home.
As soon as I step out of the taxi, one of the young boys from the family immediately says, "Do you have it? Do you have it?" Meaning, do we have the equipment to show the film? And we're like, "We do." I mean, he was just so, like, almost ultra eager.
The family had requested multiple times to see a film based on the life of Jesus. They gathered in a large room and huddled around the computer screen to watch the film with the two American women.
To watch a Jesus film wasn't anything offensive because Jesus is very highly regarded and respected by Muslims.
Dana Curry needed to leave before the film was over. The moment she got into the taxi, armed Taliban forced their way inside and took her to a government building in the center of town. When Heather Mercer finished showing the film to the family, she said her goodbyes, but as soon as she stepped outside the gate and got into her taxi, she was surrounded by Taliban guards, armed with Kalashnikovs. They commandeered the vehicle and sped away.
I had no idea where we were going. I didn't know if they were gonna take me to a mountainside and kill me or rape me or what they were gonna do.
The problem was that this family worked together with the intelligence. They were betrayed, which is very sad because this is a family that Dana and Heather and others also helped.
After the failure of team leader George Taubman to obtain the release of the American women, the remaining Shelter Now staff began to take basic precautionary measures. Deanna Thomas from Australia and Margaret Stiebner from Germany decided to go to the SNI office to retrieve their money and passports.
And when we arrived, we saw they had barricaded the front gate, and out of nowhere the Taliban came and gathered around us. There was probably 10 or more.
We suddenly heard a radio call. We heard Diana's voice, and I think she shouted into the radio, "We are getting arrested, or the Taliban are coming."
The first moment you have a lot of pictures of what going to happen. Then you realize you're arrested now. So you think of all what you've heard about Taliban and what will be in prison. So this runs in some seconds through your minds.
Peter Bunch, an engineer from Australia, heard the ominous transmission on the radio as he was driving to his work site and went immediately to investigate.
So we went back and tried to negotiate with these guys just to let the women go, but they were pretty definite. They weren't going to let them go. And so the next thing, I was commandeered in my own vehicle to drive these armed guards and the women to a prison.
Katrin had gone to the kids project just to inform the workers and give last instructions in case that we would have to evacuate quickly.
The Taliban, for some reason, thought we were running a school in this project, trying to indoctrinate the kids with Christianity.
I actually waited for the main worker to talk with him because he was away, and while I waited, the Taliban came to arrest me. If you have 20 Taliban with the big turbans and Kalashnikovs in their hand, they are very convincing.
I had just my shalwar kameez on when my door was opened and 10 Taliban with Kalashnikovs stood in my bedroom. I only had the thought, I will not show them any fear. They will not intimidate me, and which was crazy.
I decided to drive over to Katrin and Silke's house. As they opened the gate, I could see just the house just full of Taliban. And as soon as I got out of the vehicle, they grabbed me, pushed me into the back seat, and then they drove off.
After ransacking the SNI headquarters in Kabul, the Taliban went to Host, Kandahar, Helmand, and Herat, destroying additional project sites and looting their satellite offices.
Religious police couldn't find any of our computers. They were very upset. And so they were constantly inquiring where they were, and I didn't tell them. This is why we just go to the Afghan staff. We'll beat them till they tell us.
یکی از روزهای بدی که در تاریخ زندگی ما بود او آگوست سال آخر بنیاد طالبان در افغانستان بود.
بعد از باز داخل دفتر شدن ما اول اجازه ندادم، باز داخل دفتر که شدن اتاقا رو تلاشی میکردن. وقتی که تلاشی میکردن دیگه نفرها رو بالا کرده بود، پرسنل دیگه نفره و بالا کردم و مرا بالا نکردم در دفتر در موتر. باز شبها رو میپالیدن و مرا قار تیر میکردن. من امروزشان که به گپ زشت زدم، باز مرا یک سلیم زد، دوام زد، مرا در موتر بالا کرد.
پس مرم برده، ما گفتم ما خو بیگناه هستیم، خو مرم برده ابری معروف ایشان زن نفر.
We were afraid that it would just take some of our people and say they have confessed that they have become Christians, maybe even under torture, and would hang them publicly.
و ما هم نمیفهمیدیم که موضوع از چی قرار است، ما چی کردیم، گناه ما چی است.
Often I prayed for them, and it was always our prayer in jail that God would release them even before we would be released.
8 foreign aid workers, including 2 Americans, have been jailed in Afghanistan for allegedly trying to convert Afghans to Christianity. Under the strict Muslim law of Afghanistan's Taliban rulers, promoting any religion except Islam is punishable by death. Along with the Americans, the arrested aid workers include 4 from Germany and 2 from Australia.
Then they took us, Peter and me, and they brought us into a little place there and opened the door, and they told us to go inside, and it was this first prison where we were. A dark place, very quite warm or hot inside, full of flies. When you're in a place like this, you're almost like in a shock, and you have to deal with that. You have to deal with all your feelings, and a lot of thoughts go through your mind. I think it was, for me, the first time that I was, locked up somewhere in the jail. I felt like, a lion in a cage. We started to calm down and started to pray together. I decided soon to refuse all the food, to start to fast. I think I wrote my name somewhere here, but I couldn't find it anymore. I wrote a couple things here. I have quite some bad memories from this place.
The remaining SNI staff, 8 adults and 8 children, were able to escape by land to Pakistan. Taubman's wife, Mariani, took some persuading.
I was not wanting to leave Georg in the prison, and I'm leaving the house is empty and nobody's there, and not knowing what's going to happen. I would be rather at home when he comes out of prison. A Taliban friend, an official from the Taliban, which was a personal friend, he came by and said, I have been out of the town, I've been away, but I heard that you are really in trouble. Can I help you?
Mariani gave them a little bag and asked them if they could smuggle it in here. I was still worried, I didn't know what happened to Mariani, and so finally I had this impression that maybe she put a note somewhere, was hiding it in somewhere in the pockets of my shalwar kameez. So I immediately went up to the plastic bag, and I opened up and pulled out the shalwar kameez, and I looked in the pockets, and here I found a note in there, a small note, and she said that, Georg, we are going tomorrow to Pakistan. Don't worry about us. That was for me, a great comfort. When I read this, I had so much peace. I mean, that's all really. At that point, I needed to know that my family was out and they were safe.
After spending a week at the Vice and Virtue headquarters, George and Peter were taken to a madrasa that doubled as a Taliban reform school prison. This prison for reluctant believers housed approximately 1,500 boys and 30 Afghan women. Peter and George were unaware that the women from Shelter Now were also being held in the same prison.
And they just led us through this door, and there was this small yard and a tree in the middle, and all these women around. And in one room, at the side of the Yeah, there were Dana and Heather.
Later that afternoon, they brought in Deanna and Margaret.
Yeah, it was quite a moment to see each other in the same situation.
At that point, it was like, what is happening? What are they doing? What's happening outside these four walls?
Udo Stolte, a coordinator for Shelter Now, flew out of Afghanistan the morning of August 3rd to return to Shelter Now headquarters in Germany. When he arrived in Pakistan for his connecting flight, he was shocked to discover the total number of those arrested had risen to 24.
I had to talk to the relatives of the captured people, of our team people, and this was also a very hard calling. I mean, to tell the people, the parents who were already scared that their daughters were going to Afghanistan. This was their nightmare, and I had to tell them, yes, your nightmare became reality now.
When Stolte arrived in Germany, he was blindsided by an aggressive media demanding information. While the Taliban prepared to interrogate Shelter Now for proselytizing, the rush to judgment by the media had already begun.
The media grabbed me immediately, right out of the train. I had to go into a press conference, and from that day on, the media people came day and night.
I told the media we help the people in their needs, and of course we as Christians, we speak about our faith if we are asked. We have never done such what people call crusade or so. We don't go to the city of Kabul and the main places and swing our Bibles and tell people you all have to come to Jesus or you go to hell. We have never done that stuff. We speak about faith, but in a very cultural way.
We found out about a rabbi, a Jewish man, and he just came to the office. He is a tiny little old man and very lovely, and he was talking about the old times, and then he was talking about the times when the Taliban tortured him, how they beaten him up, how they took him into prison and tried to convert him, but never succeeded, so he remained in his Jewish belief.
They began in 1993, about 20-30 Muslim men, including the spiritual leader Mullah Omar. They called themselves Taliban, which means student, and they would study Islam, and they were very disgusted at the way that Afghanistan had become fractured, very violent, chaotic, lawless society. These group of men were having a meeting in a mosque one day when some distraught parents came in, and one or possibly two girls had been raped by a local commander, and he'd shaved their hair and painted them and ridiculed them. And the parents begged the Taliban to do something, and they went and got hold of this commander and they murdered him in a very brutal way. His men dropped their arms and said, "We are with you guys." They basically charged through a large chunk of Afghanistan with the Quran in one hand and ordering people to drop their arms and promising them security and a more lawful society with a better quality of life. And they just gained huge support.
بله تو که تحقیق میبرد یکی اینجا میشه یکی اون طرف سه چهار بغل میشه یکی از اون طرف میگه دیگهش از طرف میگه بگو چقدر نفر از دین شما گشتاندین چقدر نفر چقدر پیسه گرفتی مثلا مثال جوج برش چقدر پیسه داد که تو یقدر نفر بیرا بساز چی بساز.
It was a very weird situation. It was a very tiny room. Taliban were running in and out. It was a bit like we were the show of the day. There was this question over and over again, why you are not eating, and the second question was why you are not married.
And I said, you know, we've got homes, we've got jobs, we've got cars. why do we need to get married? And that was a bit of a shock to him because women are very dependent on men in their culture.
So they had a translator. They would think about a question, translate this question into English, then write this question down into Pashto, then give us a question into English, then you would answer the question in English, then we would write down the question in English, sign it with our name, then the translator would translate the question from English into Pashto and write it down in Pashto.
Even when we had to fill in forms, you were the wife of or the daughter of. You had no identity as a woman except that you belonged to someone.
These guys were just, they were not respectful of any persons.
And this one man, he took Dana's very clear and accurate answer, written on a piece of paper, ripped it up, screamed at us and said, "You're lying, tell us the truth."
That's why they brought us in here. And they took us out and took us into this room here. They were lying a lot. They told us that the ladies had confessed this, and our Afghan workers have confessed different things.
بعد از او که ما اونجا ماندیم و خدمات تحقیقات ما شروع میشد و ما را میبردن و یگان ذره لط و کوب ما را میکردن و تهدید ما را میکردن، حتی با مرگ ما را تهدید میکردن که ما شما را خلط چی، شما شاید ما شما را اعدام باید بکنیم.
که شما را ما هر کدامتان صبح اعدام میکنیم. دیگه ما میگفتیم اگه ما بمریم ما به جنت میریم.
I was thinking myself, Allah will release us because we are clean. We don't have any fault.
At that time, of course, nobody talked about Al-Qaeda. We just talked about Arabs, but that's where a lot of these Al-Qaeda people came in here to talk.
The Arabs think, well, this is another jihad up here, so we can go off and fight another religious war and help our brothers,
We were actually surrounded by Arabs in our office.
Ultimately, they probably were a bit of a thorn in the side of the Taliban, really. They just annoyed them, probably, in the end. And they were harder on foreign women than anyone else.
We knew that there were people working with Al-Qaeda who were there from all different countries.
Sometimes they would just tell the store owner to clear the store. These women aren't allowed in here while we're shopping. Or they would be the ones that would spit on the foreign women,
Osama bin Laden's wife, one of his wives, lived opposite our office. Maybe they were watching us.
In
the later days of their captivity, Mashuk, a pilot for the Northern Alliance, captured by the Taliban, would become a devoted and trusted friend.
دا شي نور دا چوکیونه چوکی یو اوس پناو دوبا
کیبل
نه وبا دوبا اوس پنا نه ده پایپو بیا دا دل د غځای کې د لوګي سره تړل او دوه کسان چک نیول دا دوه په خېده سره چک نیول کدی به حل کهل.
We heard later that they decided to beat us, that they wanted to torture us, but one guy out of this committee prevented it by talking to a minister and just stopping these plans.
A former teacher who was given the code name of Randall by the SNI prisoners was forced into service by the Ministry of Justice to lead the investigation against the aid workers. It didn't take long for Randall to conclude that grave injustices had occurred. At great personal risk to his own life, he decided to help the aid workers in any way he could.
In the process, when their investigation was going on, some of the members of that delegation, they were against me. They understood that this person is a little, he's showing compassion to these people. And also they told me many times that you should be very serious with them. Even you should beat them, because I told them, no, I cannot. We should investigate from them according to international law, and we should pay to the human rights.
As the interrogations lingered for weeks and weeks, and we had no contact with anyone in the outside world, I really just didn't know what to do with that tension and that pressure that continued to build. Every minute seemed like an hour, every hour seemed like a day, every day seemed like a week. told every single day, it'll be 2 to 3 more days and you'll go. Don't worry, 2 to 3 more days. And oh, don't be afraid, you're guests in our country. That was one thing the Taliban told us all the time, you're guests in our country.
If you always get wrong information, like we got from the Taliban, you have to find a way how to deal with this.
We pretty quickly fell into a routine.
Your routine just kind of is around meal times. You're living from one meal time to the next.
They would bring some the flatbread, naan and so forth for breakfast, which we didn't mind. There's one thing about the food, as far as that fresh flatbread, you could exist on that. If you like bread, you could exist on that plus a little bit of extra without worrying too much.
We usually got our food in these aluminium bowls. I think it was one bowl between 2 people, and you would use the bread to dip into the bowl. Our food mainly was vegetarian.
Everyone had chores, like someone would clean the toilet every day, someone would do the morning dishes, the lunch dishes, and the dinner dishes. So we were on this rotating schedule, and someone would sweep. So at least we had more control of our environment.
We started to pray in the mornings, in the evenings, and established a routine which really helped us over all this month to keep sane, to keep in peace with each other and also with God.
And sometimes Heather didn't want to join us. There was some altercations there between us, and she separated herself from us, and we were just constantly just praying for her.
For the better half of those first 7 weeks in the first Vice and Virtue prison, I lived in complete fear of what was going to happen next, and felt disconnected from God, felt disconnected from the other women, and really found my haven, I guess, with the other Afghan women.
Well, number one, we were learning the stories of these Afghan women and hearing just the injustice that was done for them. And then every day someone would break down, just wailing, crying.
It was amazing to see, on the one hand how strong they are, but on the other hand so much crying and weeping. I have never experienced before. There was no day without weeping. And you can't help them because you're in prison as well.
One was a 12-year-old girl, and one day she told me she is married. I said, no, you're a child. No, she said, I'm married. And then I got to know that she ran off from her husband because he was in his 30s and he was misusing her and was beating her all the time. And here she is and got in prison because she left this man.
In our eyes, they had done no harm, nothing wrong. Our first contact with the outside world was when the Red Cross delegation came.
They insisted on seeing us alone, but the Taliban really didn't allow us to be alone with them.
That was the first time that we saw Georg and Peter as well.
We were more happy to see one another rather than our officials, because it's like they really couldn't do much for us anyway.
The next day, diplomats from Germany, Australia, and the United States, along with Heather's father and Dana's mother, were allowed to visit the prisoners.
The Germans got to go in and talk to their diplomat, and then the Australians got to go be with their diplomats.
My question was, what does the press write about us in our home countries? And actually the question in mind was, do my parents know? Does my family know? And this guy looked at me as if I had fallen from another star, and finally he realized what was our situation. He said, your world headlines.
They waited for the last for Heather and I so we could have a longer time since our parents were there. I got to sit by my mom and talk with her, and it was just wild how she said that we were on the top of every major prayer chain.
All the people were praying. This was really, they prayed in unity. It was not a matter of a denomination. Every Christian who heard this was praying. So this was also, I believe this was the biggest miracle at all, that the Christians were one for about 3 or 4 months.
And in this situation, Dana and Heather's parents came. And the Taliban was so cruel, they allowed them, I think, only a few minutes every 5 days.
And it doesn't sound like a long time, but 5 days in the middle of everything that was going on could have been 5 lifetimes.
When it finally came out that this was going to happen, that they had to wait for every next visit another 5 days, I was so furious.
She knew it would be an offense to them, so she did it.
I thought this is the right thing to do, and I just scratched a life-size elephant into the wall. And then I took soap for dishes and some Vaseline and mud and water, and I just mixed this and made some color out of it and painted this elephant, and it looked very nice.
We knew that the Taliban had banned paintings or pictures that depicted human life or animal life.
And the girls, they just quickly came and looked into our room from the inside courtyard, and they had other ideas what we could do, and so it was like, draw this, draw a lion and a rabbit and a cat and a dog. So the next day we just emptied out our room and I started to just do a fresco over the wall.
We hadn't really thought much about it until they came in and saw some of her artwork on the wall of our room.
The boss of this prison was pretty unhappy. He said, in this room nobody can pray anymore, we have to repaint the walls.
With his deep understanding of Afghan culture and customs, Taubman worked tirelessly to befriend their captors, often engaging them in conversation about their families. Eventually, his efforts paid off.
Some were become quite good friends of us, and we were even able then to smuggle letters back and forth.
They were not Christians, they were Muslims and Afghans. But they knew that here is a very, very wrong and bad thing going on, so they tried to help.
The judge in third position, was my friend. He told me that we didn't find anything wrong about them. Now, what should we tell them? That why we arrested these people and why we keep them for so long time in the custody. I told him that I also have this question, that why you keep them for a long time. At the beginning, we told you that there is nothing wrong with them.
One day they took us out of the cell and they didn't tell us again where we are going. It's kind of scary when they take you and they don't tell you what is going to happen to you.
We saw suddenly as we drove close by the building, there was a lot of people were standing there, a lot of foreigners. We noticed people had cameras and...
There were all these journalists, and the van had to make its way through the whole thing. It was like a madhouse.
Then they brought us into the Supreme Court, the highest court of the country. This is incredible.
The place was filled like sardines. As you walked in the doorway, there were hundreds and hundreds of shoes sitting outside the room.
It looked, to me, almost looked like some kind of a scene somewhere in a dark age,
The trial room was filled with at least 100 reporters, Dana's mom, my dad, Peter's cousin, and then a representative from each of our respective countries.
There was this big desk there, and the Chief Justice Nur Mohammed Saqib was sitting there behind this desk. He never looked at us. It's like he despised us.
The judges sitting on the sides of the room were curled up in their chairs, massaging their prayer beads, and some of them were asleep during the whole questioning process.
I remember Peter making a comment and saying, gee, they must have got these off the farm.
It's like a kangaroo court where all the guys came in from out of the trees,
And the judge basically said, you can either defend yourself or you can tell us what lawyer you have. And we're like,
how can we get a lawyer? We've not been able to see anyone. How would we have a lawyer? This is ridiculous.
But up to then, we had no idea about the charges against us.
He was telling us you will get a fair trial, we will judge you according Sharia law.
Margaret was accused of belonging to a criminal organization.
I think it was the first moment I really realized we have a very serious situation.
For Silke, just the fact that she She was in a house of Afghans.
What else can you do in an Afghan family than to proselytize?
The Chief Justice said that they would take now the journalists and would show them the evidence. Also, he wanted to say right away that that's not all what they found, but the investigation is going on and there will be more material would be produced. And he had to say that because he had so little. He could hardly show anything. It was absolutely ridiculous.
The Chief Justice looked half drunk.
The interpreter had difficulties to interpret it because he just kept on talking, and I listened to him, and the interpreters often said something completely different.
I remember one of the journalists standing up and he said, what you just translated is not right. He said this and that. And the whole situation was meant to be a show, and in the end it was so, I think it was not what the Taliban expected it to be.
Some media were not really sensitive. They said with the head letters, "Death sentence to the shelter now people?" ?
I went inside the van and they closed the door and drove off. I opened the door, the side window. I was leaning outside and I was shouting to these reporters that were there. I said, "Please tell our parents that we are fine." This scene was just sent out, in the news all over the world. Next day, when my father had birthday, my brothers and sisters came together, and they told my father that they had seen me on TV. And as they turned on the TV, my father could see that photo, could see me on TV, and he could hear me say that we tell our parents we are fine.
After the disastrous show trial staged by the Taliban, the prisoners began the search for an experienced lawyer to defend them.
This guy called me from the US Embassy in Kabul. There was this American diplomat, David Donahue, and he called me up and said, well, we've been giving you contact information, and we were wondering if you could discuss whether a lawyer was required in this case.
Well, we selected Atif, one because he spoke Pashto, which is the language of the Taliban.
Well, I had a background in Sharia, and I had some education from the US.
He himself was a very conservative Muslim who favored the Taliban. So we thought for all of these reasons he would be a favorable choice.
So I kind of blended in both systems, and I might be the good choice for them.
On September 9th, Afghanistan's foreign minister announced the assassination of the Northern Alliance guerrilla leader, Ahmed Shah Massoud, by al-Qaeda operatives.
He was the only person who really put up resistance against the Taliban, and when he was assassinated, for me, I really felt so depressed and so hopeless.
We knew that things were really out of control. If they hadn't already been, they were even more so. And here the Taliban only seemed to be getting stronger.
One time what they were doing is they announced a big game, soccer game, and then when the stadium was full of people, they closed the gates and then they brought out the prisoners and then they executed them. So everybody had to watch it. They had to kneel down and then they execute. Yes. Yeah. And then they fired them in the back of the heads.
At around 3 or 4 o'clock, I was asked to come to the US consulate in Peshawar, and I was told that I had been hired and I should pack my bags and leave as soon as possible. They were arranging a UN flight for me, and a couple of hours later, I'm in my office and I suddenly heard that there were these crashes in New York, and then the world turned over.
They came in and said something big happened in America.
When we then heard that the World Trade Centers had collapsed, I was not sure about this news. I always thought it might be propaganda. I feel like I have a blank in my experience because what others experience with this film being repeated all over again, we are missing this grief about what happened. It is a kind of collective memory in the world, and we don't have that. I feel that I miss a part in this.
As the story started to unfold and I started to get more information, it really hit me. I really knew there was only one person that was able to do that, and it was Osama bin Laden.
The 8 Westerners soon realized they had gone from being religious prisoners accused of committing a crime under Islamic law to political prisoners of war, held as bargaining chips for Al-Qaeda and the Taliban.
They were, even from the beginning, hostages. They were just taken in advance because everything was planned in advance.
The fact that they were so much after our Americans suddenly made sense.
Those 2 girls were set up to get caught.
They wanted to have as many hostages as possible, maybe to pressure the American government.
I knew it would make the situation for Georg harder in Afghanistan, because I knew all the foreigners in Afghanistan would have to leave.
We heard suddenly the diplomats had to go. They just pulled them out.
It was a strange feeling to see these planes just passing over our head, and we knew that we were the last foreigners in the country, and yeah, also that there would be no medical help anymore.
And then a week later, the Taliban came to our prison and said that they were moving us somewhere else.
They came in and told us that we had to go. We need to come out. They were lying at us. They said they'd take us to a nice place outside of Kabul, which is very safe and nice because the possible attack of Americans. They drove us again under heavy protection of Taliban fighters. We traveled through the city, traveled through there's a big compound with a huge gate.
The place that they put us was exactly what you would imagine a foreign prison being like.
And here was the next jail called Riesa Takik.
Broken, cracked, cold concrete floors, big steel doors, bars on all the windows, dirt, no green anywhere.
They were held in the Secret Service prison.
They kept Christians and terrorists. That was the profile of the people that they kept there.
The room was full of rubbish.
Got dirty mattresses, they were full of lice, and blankets, they were so, was so disgusting.
We thought, well, where is the toilet in this place? And there was a hessianed off area in the courtyard not far from where the water pump was. That was the toilet.
This is the room where the 6 ladies were living in here.
One of the few things that we would look forward to, apart from being out in the yard and sort of doing a few other things and having prayer together, would be to see them and to have some time together.
Peter and I usually came here, we sat down here on the toshek, and they made some tea for us and some coffee, and we just discussed, different things and tried to encourage one another. Yeah, also when the lawyer came, when we prepared our defense together with him, we were here in this room here. We were sitting on the floor and we were talking with him.
The main charge against the detainees was that they were proselytizing or preaching Christianity. And when we looked into Sharia law, and the more we researched, we found out that even though it was considered something that had to be punished, it had to go through a process. And we tried to prove in our defense that they could not, in any event, could not be put to death for this crime if it was proved that they had really committed a crime. We had found out during our research that Mullah Omar himself had passed an edict that if somebody was found doing this, he could be put in jail for 3 to 10 days and then banished from the country. And that piece of evidence was absolutely fatal to the case of the prosecution.
To the dismay of the hostages, Atif Ali Khan's defense fell on deaf ears. After being refused any further access to his clients, Atif left Kabul and returned home to Pakistan defeated and disappointed. With Atif's departure, the hostages had lost all contact with the outside world.
We'd asked the guy in charge, could we please buy some burqas, because we really believed God was going to get us out. And when we got out, we did not want Al-Qaeda to know who we were. We had these burqas for probably a week before the guy in charge took them off us.
We were all waiting for the war to start, and nobody knew when exactly. The Taliban were very anxious and very eager to fight.
They had tanks in the yard that they would shoot off, I mean guns. We would hear the Taliban on this floor up above us every night loading their AK-47s. And
we didn't think America would bomb until we got out of there, because it was 3 countries. We just figured America's not going to bomb unless they have major proof. I mean, they're going to have major evidence before they do anything like that.
It's hard to tell. It was no fear. What I had was a kind of excitement that something is going to happen. You can't explain such a thing.
I guess as a pacifist, that was probably one of the few times I looked forward to war.
You see these rooms down there? Downstairs were our workers.
After discovering the Afghan employees were also being held in the same prison, Taubman learned of the grueling interrogations and beatings that they were having to endure by the hands of the Taliban. Throughout this cruel process, not one of them had betrayed George or Shelter Now International.
مرا 2 بجا خواست که به تحقیق کوتاه دیگه که تو رو میکشیم اینطور از خوب زجر کرد. این روز مرا میکشد، صبح میکشد، لحظه مرگ بود.
Early one morning, Taubman and Bunch saw the SNI workers being loaded onto a prison bus. Through prison insiders, they found out later that their faithful employees had been taken to the infamous Pulicharki prison to join 6,000 other inmates.
Well, October 4th is when Yvonne Ridley showed up.
I wanted to do something new and something fresh for my newspaper, the Sunday Express. And I decided that what I should really do is speak to some people in Afghanistan and find, out from them what life was like under the Taliban. And the only way that I could do this was by sneaking into the country. I put on a burqa, went in with a group of people as a wedding party, and got into the country. It was amazing. They say that the burqa makes you invisible, and I did become a non-person, totally invisible, and walked straight under the noses of the Taliban checkpoint, and not a second glance was given. I then spent some time in Jalalabad, and it was on my way back that I was caught by the Taliban and interrogated in Jalalabad for 6 days.
And they told her they were bringing her to Kabul to get on a plane to go home. And they brought her to this prison.
And my captors opened a cell door and they said, "This is it, this is where you're staying." And the harsh and grim reality that I wasn't going home on a Red Crescent plane just hit me, and I went crazy. I swore at them, I cursed them, I was furious that they'd lied to me, and I was shouting and screaming at them in a very aggressive manner when another cell door opened and 6 women came trooping out wearing the hijab, the headscarf.
And when I saw her, I was so excited, and I said, "Are you with the Red Cross? Are you with the Red Cross?"
And I looked and I said, "Who do you know from the Red Cross that uses language like that?" And "Oh my God, you're the Christians."
She was very angry and she had tears in her eyes. She was very upset.
I was still very distressed and said, "Will you tell these people to put me in a hotel immediately? I am not staying in prison. I don't do squalor." And then I got out my cigarettes and I said, "Does anybody mind if I smoke?" And I'm just about to light up when one of the girls said, "Yes, we don't like cigarette smoke and this is a no-smoking cell." And I'm thinking, what sort of Christians are these? I'm really, really distressed and they won't let me smoke. And they said, "Well, you can go outside into the courtyard and smoke there. But we're just about to have a meeting." And I said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "What about?" And they said, "Well, we have 2 meetings a day." And I was fascinated by this, so I suddenly forgot about my nicotine craving at that point and said, "Well, do you mind if I sit in and listen?" And they said, "It's up to you." So I thought, this must be a great escape committee. Maybe they're updating each other on the latest tunnel they've dug, and because what else happens in this cell that they meet twice a day? And then they sat in a circle and they got out Bibles. They then handed around hymn sheets. Some were handwritten, and these were songs that they had created themselves. At that point I went outside and smoked 3 cigarettes off the trot, and I could hear their voices coming out, and you know, it was very melodic and angelic. And then suddenly I heard the call to prayer on the other side of the prison wall from a nearby mosque. And I just thought, you know, I'm caught in a parallel universe here. I've got religious fanatics on one side and religious fanatics on the other side.
Their true intentions revealed. The Taliban offered to release the 8 detainees if the US and Britain would abandon the threat of military action and negotiate. Both countries rejected the offer.
But I was just walking around this courtyard when there was this surface-to-air missile went up and lots of firing and flak. Britain and America had sent in a spy plane, a drone, and Heather started screaming. And she was running round and demanding that we were all, you know, put into a bunker of some sort, which horrified me because I thought if it is the start of the war, the last thing I want to be done, you know, is to be sealed up in some bunker.
It was no light in here. It was also very dark, and then we came in here. Ha, Assalamu alaikum. And then, you know, when the bombarding was, then they closed those steel doors. They closed all the steel doors, so we were locked in there. Like this one also here.
On the 7th of October,
we were all outside in the courtyard and we could see these traces in the sky, and it was like fireworks. We're all standing there looking at this, and all of a sudden the prison warden, who was 6.5 months pregnant with twins, she grabbed hold of my hand really tight.
So one bomb after the other came down.
Our windows were shaking, where doors would fly open. I mean, it was really intense.
She indicated she was in labour. She kind of had strong pain. We took her inside and there were no lights. One of the girls asked her, had her waters broken? And she said yes. And I'm thinking, oh God, now we've got to deliver babies.
The whole building was shaking and we didn't know what will happen, and just this not knowing, the uncertainty of the situation is very hard. Not knowing the next second will you be alive or not, and you're afraid and shivering.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. That was my place here. And Peter's bed was here.
I'm a good sleeper, and I was actually able to sleep through some of the bombing, and he just upset him. He said, "What's wrong with you?"
One of the senior officers from the Foreign Ministry came to talk to me. I refused to communicate with him. I swore at him and his party, and I spat at them. There was one in particular who I called the smiling assassin.
On October 8th, the day after the bombing campaign began, Ridley was taken to the Pakistani border and released without explanation. Later in a press conference, the Taliban ambassador to Pakistan, Mullah Zaif, is quoted as saying, "We are releasing the English woman. She is a very bad woman with a very bad mouth."
I often thought about the girls as the war unfolded, and especially Heather. She was my main concern.
And I remember talking to the Afghan woman who was staying there that evening, and she said the last time there was war in Kabul, I was here at this prison working, and I went home and I found that a rocket had hit my house. And she said, I saw my children all over my yard. She said they killed my 2 sons, and my daughter lost her leg in the rocket attack. And she said, I'm so afraid to go home and find that again. It just made me see more how desperate this nation was in need of God. and that God was really the only one who could bring peace to all the suffering that they'd gone through.
Later on, the planes came day and night. It is a situation of permanent stress, actually.
The more the bombarding proceeded and the more the Taliban were hit, the more tense they were becoming. Often they said, look, here are your planes again coming, here are your friends coming again. And so they very always associated us with the Americans.
The Taliban began shuffling the detainees in an attempt to keep the US military from knowing their location. But despite their efforts of concealment, the hostages' whereabouts was always known.
In the nighttime they were in one place, in the daytime in another place. But every time they were changing the place, I got information that they are here. I was informing American.
It was one of the most notorious prisons in Kabul. They never would tell you when they were taking you.
Every night they brought us in here.
For this prison, it was such a oppressive place. I mean, it's hard to tell.
So as we started to walk down those steps, I saw people coming out from down there, and as I looked in their faces, they were really sick. A lot of them were coughing. It was quite cold and damp down there.
They were waiting for amputation and for the execution. I mean, and you felt this in the atmosphere. I was so awful.
And it was horrifying. I was really in a shock. The mullah that was in charge of that prison, of this terrible prison called Riyasat-e-Si, the nickname he had was Mullah Cable. He tortured people, he beat them with steel cables.
We could hear someone on the other side of the high walls who was getting beaten by the Taliban, and every time when the whip came down there was an awful screaming, and it was just a horrific night, just thinking of this poor person on the other side getting tortured. And then at the end of that, they made this person sing.
One day I just walked from cell to cell just to see how they were living, and I saw terrible conditions there. 6 people crammed into one little room. And when I started to ask them how long they were there, some were 1 year there, 6 months, 7 months. People had been tortured, and it was a terrible condition. But I was sometimes at night I was scared to come up here because, you know, a lot of these people they look very strange, and most of the people that were in this jail, they actually were mentally already completely confused. They had been tortured, had been months and months down there in this jail. And a number of them, they always had chains around their legs, big chains. And when they came up the stairs, I could always hear them how they were, you know, pulling them along the way up the stairs. I don't even know how people survive in there after being in there for such a long time.
I remember one guy who really encouraged us, and he'd spent 6 years in jail for nothing at one stage, and when he came out, like his wife thought he was dead, and when he came home to his family, his wife had a heart attack within a few days, and then they wouldn't have anything to do with him. So after 6 years of being in jail for nothing, he got home to his family and he was rejected and outcast even from his family. It's like, and now he's in jail again, but he's encouraging us, you know. It just shows you sort of what they're made of, some of these guys. Fantastic.
Mashuki always came and visited us and encouraged us. He helped us to get some coffee, and he always worked on some kind of a plan to escape from here. And one time he already had 5 steel saw plates. He got it smuggled in, and then we had a plan to go to one of the rooms here and cut the bars open and then flee from here. But in order to do this, and in order to get the ladies down, he would have had to kill some of the guards that were watching the ladies upstairs. And then we said, no, we don't want to do it because we don't want to kill anybody, so that we get free. He was 8 months here, 8 months the whole time. And he was living with 6 people in one room.
Well, we realised that a lot of the people were not in there for any major crimes, of course. They were in there for political reasons. They're either university students who shouldn't be studying because the Taliban didn't like education, or they were people who were suspected of being sympathisers with the Northern Alliance, or just because they're an ethnic group which traditionally was against the Taliban. And so the method was really that they would get them in there, they would beat them, try and get them to confess to something so that then they had a crime against them, and then ask them for money to get out.
We sense that now the time of the war is coming to an end. It continues like that. The troops will soon come into Kabul. And that, of course, was an absolute surprise for the Taliban. And the more, of course, that was going on, the more unpredictable they were becoming. And the more the danger was there that they would take revenge on us.
God gave me a scripture from Isaiah, and it said, "You live in constant terror every day because of the wrath of the oppressor who is bent on destruction. Where is the wrath of the oppressor? The cowering prisoners will soon be set free. They will not die in their dungeon, nor will they lack bread."
We had the feeling that this night it would happen, and we should just keep low profile and keep our heads down, and in the morning we would be free.
The Taliban came to the prison that we'd been in during the day and told us we had to immediately get up and leave and go to this other place.
They told us, you must quickly come, you must quickly come. We will go now to the other jail again. Come quickly.
The Taliban were very afraid, very antsy.
On the way over to the other jail, he almost several times had an accident. He was so nervous, he drove so fast that he almost hit a couple of vehicles.
Georg, on the way in the car, he gave us always some notes with the latest news that we know, and he said there might going to happen, the Northern Alliance is soon before Kabul, so be prepared, something can happen tonight, and if they're knocking at your door, you don't open.
So we made a decision as a team that if the Taliban came to get us, to move us anywhere else, that we would not leave unless we had Georg and Peter with us, because we suspected that they would try to separate the men and the women.
We were locked up again in the underground jail. Our friend Mustafa came out and says, the war in Shamali has started. We just heard the news that finally the Northern Alliance has pushed out of Shamali towards Kabul.
That night the prison was different. They'd turned off all the lights on the street outside of that prison, and the bombing that night was exceptionally heavy.
They came down here with Kalashnikovs and they told us, you have to get out here quickly.
Somebody starts coming and banging on our doors, telling us to come, get out and to come with them.
We said, no, we're not coming out.
They kept banging, they kept yelling at us, and we're getting more and more angry.
And I'm thinking, they're going to smash this door down if we don't open it.
Finally, we heard Georg's voice.
I said, there's no chance, we have to go.
We opened the door. There was an army of men that we'd never seen before.
The Taliban were strangers to us. It were not the wardens we had before.
They were scraggly looking, like wavy black long hair, major black eyeliner.
And they were dressed for war.
They were very, very nervous, ready to shoot.
That was a very terrifying moment.
When we got outside, they had 2 vehicles. The first one was the Land Cruiser. They were trying to separate us, and we said, no, we're not getting separated.
This was almost like our worst fears were coming through.
We all piled into the Land Cruiser, and some of us on one side of the bench at the back of the Land Cruiser were sitting on something which we later realised was a rocket launcher.
And the city was a very strange atmosphere. It was, were not many people on the street. A lot of the Taliban were rushing out of the city. I knew exactly where we were going. That was the road to Kandahar.
Mullah Omar had established his power base in the city of Kandahar. George knew they were headed toward the last Taliban stronghold. Not wanting to panic the others, he kept this information to himself.
That was our worst fears coming through, because we know if he would go to Kandahar, we'd never come out alive.
The guy was driving erratically all over the road. Bombs were falling. At one stage, he was driving with no lights.
30 minutes down the road,
We heard the guys in the front say, Kabul's fallen.
there was sort of a sense of shock or unbelief, like, oh my gosh, did we just miss our chance? Was that our chance for freedom?
یک نفر بسیار مقبول است، کالای سفید دراز در جانش است، ریش بسیار مقبول داره. برای من میگه که تو بیگناهستی، تو تشویش نکو، تو رها میشی.
بیا جنگا شروع شده با طالبان.
Often I prayed for them, and it was always our prayer in jail that God would release them even before we would be released.
پس که نمی سر جنگ شد خودش شو گریخت ما کلفار میده کردیم آمدیم.
There was different kind of prisoners there, and some of them they were very expert in the breaking of locks.
About 3 hours down the road, they stopped, pulled the car off the road, and said,
We want $5 million US. And Georg had said to him, if you can get us a satellite phone, we'll try and get you this money.
At that point, really I didn't care how we would be released.
I said, Georg, I really don't believe God wants to rescue us this way. I don't want to give money to this guy. I'd rather die.
This one mullah, he said that we all should be killed, and that we are infidels, we should kill them, and they would become ghazis, some kind of honorable name for somebody that had killed infidels. Mullah Hassan, he didn't agree. He suggested that only Peter and myself should be killed, and the 6 ladies should be divided up, and this should be taken as their holy loot. And there's another word that he used, ghanimat, the spoil that people get from a holy war. I was really devastated. My hopes really had gone. And it was actually Heather that pulled out a little Bible and started to quote Bible scriptures.
though our enemy rises up against us, we would not stumble or fall, that we would not die but live and proclaim what the Lord had done.
She was coping really well at this stage.
I had my head down and I just listened to what she was saying. Suddenly I could feel there was hope rising up again in my heart.
So that night when they stopped the vehicle, they said we were going to sleep in this place and then we were going to call our governments. Well, we looked around, there were no buildings anywhere. All there was this steel shipping container.
It was a really terrifying thought to spend a night in this container.
There's a history of container, and they put people in container and they would close the container and either shoot in the container from outside or just throw, before they close the door, a bomb inside.
They even connected these containers up with live wires and people were electrocuted inside. And
Heather and Georg fought for the entrance to keep it open.
That was one of those occasions where I thought, you know what, they can beat me, but I will not let them lock me into this container.
She didn't move any meter and was crying all the time. So she was fighting that they don't lock the door, and I'm glad she did that.
Eventually they seconded to that and agreed and put a guard on the door.
There were some old blankets, two blankets for 8 people, and an old dirty mattress.
And it was like sleeping in an ice box.
I couldn't sleep. And a lot of, terrifying thoughts went through my mind.
And I sat up and I talked with the guard who was in there with me, who was really quite a nice guy. And they brought him some tea and he shared his tea with me. And he could tell that I was very cold, so he gave me his blanket. And then he gave me a bowl with some heated coals in it, and he said, put this between your feet, it will help keep you warm.
As morning came and we're on the road, it was just beautiful to be out among the mountains. It's like not the right circumstances probably. It's like I can remember thinking, man, I wish I had my camera with me, like these are photos I'd love to have, but and it was just to be out in the open road after 3 months of confinement and just be going somewhere was just nice. even though we didn't know where we were going.
They brought us to Ghazni. We arrived in the city, and finally we end up in this huge prison.
But when we got there, we found ourselves in the middle of an attack. The Talib that we had been with on that trip out of Kabul disappeared. We never saw them again. And we were in the hands of other Talib. One of them came into the room where we were.
And I tried to talk to them and says, why are you doing this to us? You know, we have helped your country, your people. Since 19 years I'm working in this country. Is this not the reward that we are getting for all the work we have done? And he just cut me off. He says, you are very evil people. You're evil people, he said.
In the midst of all of this, we heard shooting around the prison and people running and screaming and other people screaming and coming.
We heard a lot of fighting outside, but then it was very still and quiet.
We looked outside the window and we saw that all of the Taliban were running away from the prison. Well, a few minutes after that, we started to hear
someone downstairs trying to break the door.
It was so scary. We thought this is now a riot and they would come and just kill us.
The door to our room just flings open and this man comes in that's covered with, he's got a ream of bullets around his chest, he's got a big machine gun in one hand, this rocket launcher thing in another, he's covered in dust, he'd been sweating, and his eyes are just bulging out of his head. He's totally shocked to find us there.
They were thinking, what in the world are these foreigners doing here in this place? And he said, you are free.
With the assistance of the military bombing, the local Afghans who supported the Northern Alliance seized the opportunity to rise up against the Taliban. In the confusion, the Taliban not only turned on themselves, but began to flee.
They didn't even have time to take us.
Eventually they reckoned it was safe enough, so down we go, and we're like a troop of people marching behind them into town.
We kept on walking, all 8 of us, and the Afghans started to walk with us, and people came out of their houses and they wanted to know who are these people, those foreigners, where did they come from?
Everywhere people were just celebrating and jubilant. And women were coming to their gates without their burqa.
That was amazing to see the joy and the excitement.
Started to hear the sounds of music that we hadn't ever heard played on the open street before.
And then we got into the centre of this town area here, and then some guy comes up and he says, oh, just come in here. So we go into his office.
After we were there for a while, I said, let's go quickly and let's go out to somewhere to the telephone office and let's call out and tell the Americans that we're free and maybe they can send in a helicopter and just fly us out.
And the amazing thing is, Randall happened to find us there.
And he told us again, I'm going to do everything I can to help you.
I mean, he was totally risking his life for us.
All night, Randall tracked the vehicle, transporting the hostages, finally meeting up with them in Ghazni. In his secret location, he presented George with a GPS phone he had smuggled into Afghanistan. In this courageous final act, Randall became forever known as their Afghan angel.
I want to contact them directly with the embassy to Islamabad because I had a satellite phone. At that time, no one had satellite phone except me inside Taliban.
With the GPS phone, George was able to contact the U.S. military, but only under the suspicious eye of their new host, a local commander who they later learned was a former Taliban.
It's almost like these people now that are helping us and are really being nice to us, we're still under house arrest. We still can't go anywhere. And we don't know where we're going or where we are, so we can't just sort of break out and go because we haven't got a clue.
Here's Georg saying to the Americans, you're going to have to abort this mission. They said, we can't. It's got to happen tonight or it's not going to happen at all.
They became suspicious and I became suspicious. Something seems to be wrong.
The commander we had met that morning, we had been introduced to him. He wanted to use us as hostages.
And finally, the commander left again, and then it seemed the whole thing was finished because here we were locked into a place, the Americans were coming. So I called them again. I said, now I'm in this house and what shall I do? You know, the guards are here, they're watching us, the commander left. These guards cannot make a decision. They said, George, take your phone and make a GPS reading.
From the satellite phone we had, they got a pinpoint of where we were, but from their aerial mapping, they knew that there was a disused airfield only half a kilometre away.
Said you get out of the house and you take the road and go to the right, and then comes another road, you take a left turn and you go down there about 200 meters, and then comes an open place, and that's where we come with our helicopters. I said, yes, I will try, but how can we get out of this house, you know? He said, try to do something, George, just get those guards and knock them over the head and take them out, and then flee and run away, you know. I said, I know I can't do that, you know. We had prayed before. I didn't tell them, but you know, we didn't want to kill anybody. It was kind of hopeless, and suddenly I get this idea. I said, look, I called Americans with a phone, and I gave them exactly our position where we are, and now they know where we are, and they're going to come here to this place. As soon as I said it, they were so shocked. They were upset, you know, they ran after me, says, did you do this? Yes, I did this, you know. I just informed them, they're going to come here to this house, they will get us out of here, you know. He says, just let us go, you know, let us run.
The guy was like, I can't let you go. If I let you go, the commander's gonna think you bribed me and then he'll kill me. I can't do that. You know, what do you want? Do you want me to die?
Because there was so much arguing and shouting going on, and so the women woke up and they wanted to know what happened, and so they found out what happened, and they were upset and they started to cry.
And they started freaking out, hyperventilating, going in the back room. We're trying to calm them down.
Came back to me again and said, you must tell Americans that they cannot come here and you cannot do that. I said, okay. I called them again, you know, did call them. These people are upset, they're mad, I'm supposed to tell you you shouldn't come, you know. He said, well, we will come anyway, you know, took care, you know, tell them to let you go. Suddenly, the Americans, they started to send in fighter planes in the city. And they came over, you know, flying over the city, you know, in the night. It was probably around 11 o'clock at that time. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, you know, when they came in, and that really had an effect on them. Oh, now they're coming, oh, you know, and then...
Eventually, at 12 o'clock at night, this guy comes in, one of the commanders, he says, you've got to shift you because the Taliban know where you are.
He says, you have to get out quickly out of this place because we found out that the Taliban come into the city, they found out where you are and they're looking for you and they're just on the way to this house. We must get out quickly. As I kind of was in panic and tried to, you know, get ready to leave, something was like a voice, just an impression I had. No, he's lying. He's just trying to trick you.
He said, we're not going anywhere with you. You can just kill us now.
Suddenly we heard in the distance the noise of the helicopters coming. When he heard that the helicopters were approaching, he panicked.
And that guy then said, okay, I'll take you, but I want money and I want the satellite phone after you've finished using it. Georg was in constant communication with the special forces.
I said, you know, we made it. We are outside. We went to the place where you told us to go. I said, should I make another GPS reading? He said, no, it's not necessary. And suddenly the battery was dead.
So we got to this strip.
With these little torches, and we tried to give signals with it.
We were just going like this, you know.
And they're flowing back and forth and back and forth. And
we waved and we tried to do anything, you know, we could.
And they weren't seeing us at all. I mean, they were getting close.
On 2 occasions, they got in so close, I thought I could stick my hand up into the sky and touch them.
This took 2 hours. They're flying back and forth over Gassen, and you can't believe how desperate we were. You know?
And it was screaming loud. The whole city was aware that something was going on, and every dog was barking.
We knew it is our only chance. We have to stay here until they find us. But on the other hand, we knew it's so dangerous. Any moment can somebody come and shoot us.
We heard them flying away, and we didn't hear anything anymore. At that time, the commander came back again, and he said, come on, you know, they don't see you, let's get away, you know. He wanted to get us away again. But then the helicopter started to come in again, and here it disappeared again, you know.
I can tell you how we were praying.
Literally just got on our faces and cried out to God and said, God, show them where we are.
There's nothing left. You have nothing.
This was really one moment where I thought, I don't know if I'm able anymore to go much further.
Heather had an idea. We light a fire.
Margaret had brought her purse with her, and she had one of those amazing purses that always seemed to have the right thing in it at the right time. And so I grabbed her purse and I started digging through her purse, hoping that maybe I could find some matches.
And sure enough, she finds matches.
And I took off one of my chadders because I had two on. She took off one of hers, Heather. There was a blanket there and we found some wood and we lit a big fire.
Next thing, they come down the strip. The two choppers come down the strip and then they put the flares out so that it's like daytime. And because they've come so close, they've blown the blinking ashes into everybody's face. We're just about catching fire here.
Then they lift back up again.
And then they started to circle and circle us. They flew around us. And then they flew up again and then turned around again and flew away. And we didn't see them anymore. And I was utterly devastated. I was sitting there, I just couldn't believe it. Suddenly somebody shouted out of the dark, "Do you speak English?"
And I'm thinking, please don't anyone answer them. They'll know we're the foreigners.
I just blurted out, "Yes."
And one of us said yes, and the other said, "Be quiet, you don't know who it is."
The next thing I see these guys, we didn't know what they were. They looked like blokes in spacesuits or something, come from the other side of the airstrip.
These helmets and wires and antennas and night vision. And they started to run up towards us, And then they counted us, and they counted 7.
We were so excited, and they were starting counting us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. And then it was funny because Georg looked at that point like an Afghan. He had a very long beard.
I looked like a mullah. And they 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And he said, hey, I'm one of the 8, take me with you. Don't leave me here.
So it was like hands on shoulders and off we go for another half a kilometre into the dark, falling through a few ditches.
And there, a 5-minute walk from where we were standing, was this massive helicopter parked next to this little Afghan mud house.
I ran into the entrance there of the helicopter and I hit a metal wall. Boom! Fell over the floor. And then the next one who came in was Heather. She fell on top of me.
And then we crawled our way to the very front.
I think I just need to get into this thing, I have to get in there, just crawling back in,
And the helicopter started to take off.
Lifting off, getting up and up and up and up.
The portholes are open on the side, the back's open. The gun turret's down through one of the windows on either side.
And I sat there and I looked up at the ceiling of the helicopter and I saw pinned to its roof an American flag. We are free, we are free.
Man, it just felt so good. I thought, man, we're out of here. Nobody shoots us down.
Later on, we found out that the city was actually retaken again by the Taliban. And we just made it out in time. One guy was coming up to me, one soldier, he says, we're praying for you all the time. And this is the first thing that really I heard coming out again, is a soldier coming up to me and says, we were praying for you.
I guess my biggest hope for Afghanistan is that they'll have true freedom, that they'll have freedom to pursue their dreams, they'll have freedom to choose who they'll worship, they'll have freedom to do whatever God's put in their heart to be.
Yeah, I hope that they will have finally a real peace. I don't think you can put up our Western system here, but they have kind of free life after all this, what the people have gone through, all the suffering, and that they come back to a normal life.
I have a bicycle. I bought a bicycle which my Chokida is using now, and I tell him time and again that this is my bicycle and I'm waiting for the time when I can ride it here. And he's laughing all the time. He doesn't know how serious I am.
To be honest with you, I think it was harder for those outside. We knew what was happening to us, but for people who didn't, it was really difficult.
Yeah, I believe, for the Taliban, who really God, I believe, brought down for the reason that they didn't care about the widows and orphans, they didn't care about the education of young women, they don't care about the status of women. In fact, they don't care about their own poor. I don't think God's happy with that,
I would look at my experience in prison and think, I didn't do that great. I didn't respond the way that I always anticipated that I would if I ever got in a situation like that. I didn't respond like all the missionary stories that I hear about or the heroes of the faith appear to have responded. It was a very raw experience with God. But as a result, I learned that I don't have anything to prove. I just need to be a humble, simple follower of Jesus and let the grace of God take me where he will.
I was sometimes so angry at the guards because they treated the Afghan women so badly. I can carry this anger forever with me and can start getting bitter and making my heart hard. But I can also choose to forgive.
By 5 a.m. the next morning, the rescue helicopters landed in Pakistan, just beyond the Afghan border. There, the 8 hostages were transferred to a U.S. military freight plane and flown to a secure location to be reunited with their families. After enduring the squalid conditions of 4 prisons, the constant threat of death at the hands of the Taliban, and surviving weeks of U.S. military bombing, the ordeal that began on the evening of August 3, 2001 ended on a quiet airstrip in Islamabad. 105 days of grueling captivity for the Shelter Now aid workers was finally over.
When we were in Islamabad and we flew out of Pakistan, flew back to Frankfurt, there were people standing behind us. This is, we know you, we were praying for you all the time. Yeah, it was, and then later on we found out that people around the world, all over, they were praying for us. You know, and if God wouldn't have done so many miracles, we would never have come out alive.
مجد ای دل که مسیحا نفس می آید خوشا به حال تو ای دل که مسیح نجات دهنده به دنیا می آید.
You have to be happy, oh my heart, that there will be a rescue camp in the world. A rescuer camp in the world.
که ز انفاس خوش